A woman knocked on Colt Mercer's door in the middle of a Montana blizzard, half dead, abandoned, left to freeze by the man who bought her like cattle. He should have turned her away. He didn't. That one choice ignited a war that would burn through the valley, expose the most powerful man in the territory, and force two broken people to decide if survival was enough, or if they'd risk everything for something more. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels.
The
blizzard hit hard just after sunset. Colt Mercer had been through worse. He'd weathered storms that buried fences, killed livestock, turned the world into a wall of white so thick you couldn't see your own boots. This one wasn't the worst he'd seen, but it was close. Wind screamed across the valley, rattling the cabin's walls, throwing snow against the windows in waves that sounded like fists pounding wood. He sat near the stove, boots off, legs stretched toward the heat. His rifle leaned against the chair within arm's reach. Always within reach. The coffee in his tin cup had gone cold an hour ago, but he held it anyway, staring into the fire through the stove's cracked door. 34 years old, alone for most of them. He didn't mind it. Solitude had a weight to it, sure, but it was predictable. You knew what it would give you and what it wouldn't. People were the opposite. They disappointed. They lied. They left. Colt had learned that young. The wind howled again, louder this time, and he frowned. Something about the sound didn't sit right. It wasn't just wind. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern. He set the cup down and listened. 3 seconds of quiet. Then, a knock, faint, deliberate, desperate. Colt didn't move right away. His mind ran through possibilities. Animals didn't knock. Bandits didn't knock politely. Neighbors didn't exist this far out. The nearest homestead was 6 miles south, and no one with sense traveled in weather like this. The knock came again. Weaker. He stood, grabbed the rifle, and crossed to the door. His hand hovered over the latch. "Who's out there?" No answer, just the wind. He cracked the door open an inch, and the cold hit him like a slap. Snow poured in, swirling across the floor. He squinted into the storm, saw nothing but white. Then he looked down. A woman. On her knees in the snow, one hand pressed against the doorframe, the other clutching a thin shawl that did nothing against the cold. Her lips were blue. Her face was pale as bone. Ice clung to her hair, her eyelashes. She looked up at him with eyes that barely focused. "Please," she whispered. Colt didn't think. He dropped the rifle, grabbed her under the arms, and hauled her inside. She collapsed the second he let go, crumpling onto the floor in a heap of frozen cloth and trembling limbs. He kicked the door shut, bolted it, and crouched beside her. "Can you hear me?" She nodded, barely. "Can you stand?" She shook her head. He scooped her up, light as kindling, and carried her to the chair by the stove. She didn't resist, didn't speak, just shook so hard her teeth clattered. Colt moved fast. He pulled a blanket off his bed, wrapped it around her shoulders, then stoked the fire until it roared. He filled a pot with water, set it on the stove to heat. His mind was running through what he knew about freezing. Warm them slow, not fast. Don't let them fall asleep. Keep them talking. He knelt in front of her. "What's your name?" Her eyes fluttered. Eliza." "Eliza what?" "Whitlock." "Where'd you come from, Eliza Whitlock?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted toward the fire, unfocused. He snapped his fingers in front of her face. "Hey, stay with me. Where'd you come from?" The Hargrove Ranch." Colt's jaw tightened. He knew the name. Everyone in the valley knew it. Samuel Hargrove owned half the territory. Land, cattle, people. He had money, influence, and a reputation for getting what he wanted. "You work for him?" She shook her head, slow and shaky. "I was supposed to marry him." Colt sat back on his heels. "You're a mail-order bride." "Was." "What happened?" Her voice cracked. "He didn't want me." The water on the stove started to steam. Colt stood, poured it into a cup, let it cool just enough, then handed it to her. "Drink, slow." She took it with both hands, trembling so hard the water sloshed. She sipped, winced, sipped again. Colt crossed his arms and leaned against the wall, watching her. She was maybe 30, maybe younger.
hard to tell with the cold still clinging to her. Dark hair, tangled and wet. Thin frame, like she hadn't eaten well in weeks. Her dress was cheap, torn at the hem, soaked through. So he brought you all the way out here, decided he didn't like you, and just left you. She nodded. In the middle of a blizzard. Another nod. Colt's hands curled into fists. He forced them open. Where were you trying to go? I don't know. Anywhere. Just away. You would have died out there. I know. Her voice was flat. Not scared, not sad, just factual, like she'd already accepted it. Colt exhaled through his nose and looked at the door. The storm wasn't letting up. It would go all night, maybe into tomorrow. Even if he wanted to take her somewhere, which he didn't, there was nowhere to go. You'll stay here tonight, he said. Storm clears, we'll figure out what's next. She looked up at him, eyes wet. Thank you. He grunted and turned away. Don't thank me yet. She fell asleep in this chair an hour later, bundled in every blanket he owned. Colt sat across from her, back against the wall, rifle across his lap. He didn't sleep. Couldn't. His mind kept circling the same thought. Samuel Hargrove left her to die. He'd heard stories about the man, cold, ruthless, the kind of rich that made people think they were untouchable. But this was different. This wasn't business. This was cruelty. And now she was here. Colt looked at her. Even unconscious, she looked brittle, like one wrong move would shatter her. But she'd made it 6 miles through a blizzard. That took something. Desperation, maybe. Or stubbornness. He didn't know which. The fire crackled, the wind howled, and Colt Mercer, who had spent years avoiding trouble, realized he'd just invited it straight through his door. Morning came gray and cold. The storm had passed, leaving the valley buried under 2 feet of snow. Colt woke to the smell of coffee. He sat up fast, hand going to the rifle. Then he saw her. Eliza stood at the stove, pouring water into his old coffee pot. She'd changed into dry clothes. His clothes. A shirt that hung past her knees and trousers she'd cinched tight with rope. Her hair was still damp, pulled back in a loose braid. She glanced over her shoulder. I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. He stood, stretched, felt his back pop. You know how to make coffee. I know how to boil water and hope for the best. He almost smiled. Almost. That'll do. She poured 2 cups and handed him one. He took it, sipped, grimaced. It was weak, but it was hot. Thank you, she said quietly. For last night. You already said that. I mean it. He looked at her over the rim of the cup. Her face was still pale, but the blue was gone from her lips. Her eyes were clearer. She looked tired, worn, but alive. You planning to tell me the whole story? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded. If you want to hear it. I do. She sat down at the small table, hands wrapped around her cup. Colt stayed standing, leaning against the counter. I came from Pennsylvania, she said. My parents died 2 years ago. Fever. I had nothing left. No family. No money. I saw an ad in a paper. Mail-order brides for the Montana Territory. It said men out here needed wives. Good men. Hard workers. And you believed it. I was desperate. Colt said nothing. They matched me with Samuel Hargrove, she continued. Sent me a letter. Said he was a rancher, successful, respectful. I thought it was a chance. When'd you get here? 3 weeks ago. And? Her hands tightened around the cup. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a housekeeper, someone to cook, clean, stay quiet. When I tried to talk to him, really talk, he got angry, said I wasn't what he expected, that I talked too much, asked too many questions. Colt's jaw tightened. 2 days ago, he told me to leave. I said I had nowhere to go. He said that wasn't his problem. Yesterday, he put me in a wagon, drove me 10 miles out, and left me on the side of the road, told me to walk south, said there was a town that way. There's no town south of here. I know that now. Colt set his cup down hard. He left you to die. Yes. And you walked here. I saw your light through the trees. I don't know what I thought. I just kept walking. Silence settled between them. Outside, a crow cawed. The sound was sharp, cutting. Colt rubbed a hand over his face. You can't go back there. I won't. And you can't stay here. She looked up at him, something hard flickering in her eyes. Why not? Because I don't need company. I'm not asking to be company. I'm asking to survive. He stared at her. She stared back, didn't flinch, didn't look away. I can work, she said. I can cook, clean, mend. I won't be a burden. You already are. She flinched at that, just a little, but she didn't break. I'll leave when the snow clears, she said quietly, but until then, let me stay, please. Colt wanted to say no. He wanted to put her on a horse, point her toward the nearest town, and be done with it. But he looked at her, really looked, and saw something he recognized. Desperation, and the will to fight through it. He sighed. You can stay until the roads are clear. After that, you're gone. Relief washed over her face. Thank you. Don't thank me, he said again. Just stay out of my way. None. She didn't. Over the next 3 days, Eliza worked. She cleaned the cabin, scrubbed floors Colt hadn't touched in months, washed windows, organized shelves. She cooked meals that were simple but edible. She mended his shirts, patched holes in his coat. He didn't ask her to do any of it. She just did. At first, it annoyed him. He didn't like the disruption. Didn't like the way she moved through his space like she belonged there. But slowly, grudgingly, he got used to it. She didn't talk much. When she did, it was practical. Do you have salt? Where do you keep the firewood? Is there a root cellar? No small talk, no prying, just survival. On the 4th day, Colt went outside to check the traps. When he came back, Eliza was sitting at the table, sewing a torn sleeve on one of his jackets. She glanced up as he walked in, snow dusting his shoulders. Catch anything? She asked. 2 rabbits. I'll make stew. He set the rabbits on the counter and shrugged off his coat. You don't have to do that. I know. He watched her for a moment. Her hands moved steady and sure, needle pulling thread through fabric. She didn't look up. You're good at that, he said. My mother taught me. She teach you anything else? How to read, how to shoot, how to keep going when everything falls apart. Colt sat down across from her. Sounds like a smart woman. She was. Eliza tied off the thread, bit it clean, and held up the jacket. Good as new. Thanks. She handed it to him. Their fingers brushed. Just for a second. She pulled back fast like she'd been burned. Colt frowned. You all right? Fine. But she wasn't. He could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her eyes dropped. Eliza. She looked up. What'd he do to you? Her face went still. What do you mean? Hargrove? Did he hurt you? She didn't answer right away, just stared at the table, jaw tight. He didn't hit me, she said finally, if that's what you're asking. That's not what I'm asking. She met his eyes. He made me feel small, like I didn't matter, like I was disposable. Colt's hands curled into fists under the table. That's worse than hitting, she said quietly, because bruises heal, but that feeling, it stays. He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. After a long silence, she stood. I'll start the stew. A week passed, then 2. The snow melted slow. The road stayed bad. Colt told himself that's why she was still there. Not because he'd stopped pushing her to leave, not because the cabin felt less empty with her in it. Just the weather. One afternoon, he was chopping wood when he heard hoofbeats. He stopped mid-swing, turned, and saw 3 riders coming up the trail. His stomach dropped. He recognized the man in front, Samuel Hargrove. Tall, clean-shaven, expensive coat. The kind of man who looked like he'd never worked a day in his life. The 2 men behind him were hired muscle. Big, hard-faced, armed. Colt set the axe down and walked toward them, slow and steady. His rifle was leaning against the cabin wall, 20 feet away. Too far. Hargrove reined his horse to a stop and looked down at Colt with cold, gray eyes. Mercer. Hargrove. I'm looking for something that belongs to me. Colt's jaw tightened. Nothing here belongs to you. I think there is. Hargrove's gaze shifted past him toward the cabin. Woman named Eliza Whitlock. Dark hair, about 30. You seen her? Can't say I have. Don't lie to me, Mercer. Colt crossed his arms. You calling me a liar? One of the hired men shifted in his saddle, hand drifting toward his gun. Hargrove held up a hand, stopping him. I'm saying I know she's here, Hargrove said, and I'm giving you a chance to hand her over without trouble. She's not yours to take. She came here under contract. That makes her my responsibility. You left her to die in a blizzard. That makes you a coward. Hargrove's expression didn't change, but something dark flickered in his eyes. Careful, Mercer. You're a long way from anyone who gives a damn about you. So are you. The door to the cabin opened. Eliza stepped out, shoulders back, chin up. She looked at Hargrove without flinching. I'm not going with you. Hargrove's mouth tightened. Eliza, be reasonable. I was reasonable when you abandoned me. I'm done being reasonable. You signed a contract. A contract you broke when you left me to freeze. That's not how the law sees it. Colt stepped between them. She's not going anywhere. Hargrove looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. This isn't over, Mercer. Yeah, it is. Hargrove turned his horse and rode off, the two men following. Colt watched until they disappeared into the trees. Then he turned to Eliza. You just made an enemy. I already had one, she said. Now I've got someone standing beside me. Colt didn't know what to say to that, so he picked up the axe and went back to chopping wood. But something had shifted, and neither of them could pretend otherwise. That night, they sat by the fire. Eliza had made bread, real bread, the kind that smelled like home. Colt ate 3 pieces and didn't say a word. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. He's going to come back. I know. And when he does, it won't be polite. I know that too. Colt looked at her. Why didn't you just go with him? Would have been easier. Easier isn't always better. He's got money, power, the law on his side. And you've got none of that. Exactly. She smiled. It was small, tired, but real. That's why I'm staying. Colt shook his head. You're stubborn. So are you. He couldn't argue with that. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire burn low. Finally, Eliza spoke. What made you let me in that night? Colt thought about it. Didn't have a choice. You did. You could have left me out there. Yeah, I could have. But you didn't. No. Why? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was rough. Because I know what it's like to be left behind. She looked at him, really looked, and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition. Thank you, she said quietly. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. Colt stood, brushed crumbs off his hands. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we're going to need a plan. For what? For when he comes back. Eliza nodded. She didn't look scared, just determined. And Colt realized, not for the first time, that she was stronger than she looked. The plan, as it turned out, wasn't much of a plan at all. Colt spent the next morning reinforcing the cabin's defenses, checking the bolt on the door, oiling the hinges on the shutters, counting ammunition. Eliza watched him work, arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe. You think he'll bring more men? She asked. He'd be stupid not to. How many can you handle? Colt glanced at her. Depends on how stupid they are. She didn't smile. I can shoot. I know. I'm serious. My father taught me. I'm not great, but I can hit what I'm aiming at. Colt set down the box of cartridges and looked at her properly. You ever shot at a person? No. It's different than shooting bottles. I know that. Do you? Her jaw tightened. I'm not asking to be a soldier. I'm asking not to be helpless. Colt studied her for a moment, then walked to the corner of the cabin and pulled out a second rifle, older, heavier, but functional. He handed it to her. It kicks hard. Brace it against your shoulder or you'll bruise. Aim low because it pulls up. Don't fire unless you have to. She took the rifle, tested its weight. And if I have to? Then make it count. She nodded, and something shifted in her expression. Not confidence exactly, more like resolve. Colt turned back to the window, scanning the tree line. The valley was quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no wind, just the kind of stillness that made his skin itch. They're not coming today, he said. How do you know? Because Hargrove's not the type to rush. He'll wait, make us nervous, let us think about what's coming. And then? And then he'll show up when we're tired. Eliza set the rifle down and crossed to the stove. Then we'd better eat while we can. Oh. They spent the afternoon in tense silence. Eliza cooked. Colt paced. Every creak of the floorboards, every shift of the wind made him reach for his gun. By evening, the quiet was unbearable. Tell me something, Eliza said suddenly. Colt looked up from where he sat cleaning his rifle. Like what? Anything. I need to hear a voice that isn't my own. He hesitated, then set the cleaning rag aside. What do you want to know? Why are you out here alone? That's a long story. We've got time. Colt exhaled slowly. He didn't talk about himself, didn't see the point, but the way she was looking at him, not prying, just asking, made it hard to say no. I grew up in Kansas, he said finally. Farm family, 5 kids. I was the middle one. My old man drank. A lot. When he wasn't drinking, he was mean. When he was drinking, he was worse. Eliza said nothing, just listened. I left when I was 16, worked ranches, drove cattle, did whatever paid. Ended up in Montana about 10 years ago. Bought this land cheap because nobody wanted it. Built the cabin myself. Been here ever since. No family? Not anymore. Friends? Don't need them. She tilted her head. Everyone needs someone. Not me. Then why'd you let me stay? Colt didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, and he didn't want to say it out loud. Eliza seemed to sense it. She didn't push, just stood and poured him a cup of coffee, set it on the table in front of him. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I'm glad you're not as alone as you think you are. He looked up at her. She wasn't smiling, wasn't joking, just honest. Yeah, he said. Me too. 2 days later, Hargrove came back. This time, there were 5 of them. Colt saw them through the window just after dawn, riding slow, deliberate, spread out in a line. Hargrove in the middle, flanked by hired guns. One of them carried a shotgun. Another had a rifle slung across his back. Eliza, Colt said, voice low. She appeared behind him, already holding the rifle he'd given her. I see them. Stay inside. Don't come out unless I tell you. Colt, I mean it. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, nodded once. Colt grabbed his own rifle and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The cold bit at his face, but he ignored it. He walked to the edge of the porch and stopped, rifle held loose but ready. Hargrove reined his horse to a halt 20 feet away. The other men fanned out, forming a half circle. Mercer, Hargrove said. His voice was calm, controlled. We need to talk. Nothing to talk about. I think there is. Hargrove dismounted, handed the reins to one of his men, and stepped forward. He moved like a man who'd never been told no in his life. You're harboring my property. She's not property. The law says otherwise. The law's wrong. Hargrove smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. You're a simple man, Mercer. I respect that. But you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I'm not making it anything. You are. I'm offering you a chance to walk away from this. No trouble, no consequences. Just hand her over, and we'll forget this ever happened. No. Hargrove's smile faded. You're protecting a woman who means nothing to you. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. The right thing. Hargrove laughed, short and sharp. The right thing doesn't pay bills, Mercer. It doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't put food on your table. It lets me sleep. Not for long. One of the hired men shifted, hand drifting toward his gun. Colt's finger tightened on the trigger of his rifle. Not pointing it. Not yet. Just ready. Hargrove raised a hand, stopping his man. I'm not here to fight you, Mercer. I'm here to remind you of reality. You're one man. I've got money, influence, and the law on my side. You can't win this. Maybe not, but I can make it expensive. Hargrove's jaw tightened. You're willing to die for her? I'm willing to die for what's right. You willing to die for what's wrong? Silence stretched between them. The hired men looked at each other, uncertain. Hargrove's face didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe. Or calculation. Finally, he stepped back. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first. Hargrove mounted his horse, turned it around. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. You just don't know it yet. Hargrove rode off, the other men following. Colt watched until they were out of sight, then lowered his rifle. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline. The door opened behind him. Eliza stepped out, pale but steady. That was stupid, she said. Probably. He's going to come back. I know. And next time he won't talk. I know that too. She looked at him for a long moment, then reached out and touched his arm, just lightly. Thank you. Colt didn't pull away. Stop thanking me. Not until you stop saving my life. He almost smiled. Almost. Ishab. That night, Colt couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, rifle across his lap, watching the tree line. The moon was high and bright, casting long shadows across the snow. Eliza sat across from him, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the dying fire. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. Regret what? Letting me stay. Colt thought about it. Really thought. No. Even though it's made your life harder? My life was already hard. She smiled faintly. Fair point. They sat in silence for a while, then Eliza spoke again, her voice softer. I used to think I was smart, careful. I thought I'd planned everything out. Come west, marry a good man, build a life. Simple. Nothing's ever simple. I know that now. She pulled the blanket tighter. But I didn't then. I thought if I just followed the rules, did what I was supposed to, everything would work out. And I ended up half dead in a snowstorm, knocking on a stranger's door. Colt looked at her. You think that was a mistake? No, I think it was the first real choice I ever made. He didn't know what to say to that. I could have given up, she continued. I could have laid down in the snow and let it take me. But I didn't. I kept walking. And when I saw your light, I chose to knock. I chose to fight. That why you won't go back to him? Partly, but mostly because I'm tired of being afraid. Colt understood that. He'd spent years avoiding anything that might hurt him. It was easier that way, safer. But it was also lonely. You're not afraid now? He asked. I'm terrified, but I'm not running. He nodded slowly. Good. She looked at him, something unspoken passing between them. Then she stood, walked over, and sat down next to him. Not touching, just close. Get some sleep, she said. I'll keep watch. You don't have to. I know, but I want to. Colt hesitated, then handed her the rifle. Wake me if anything moves. I will. He leaned back against the wall, closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Safe. 3 days passed, then a week. Hargrove didn't come back, but his presence lingered like smoke. Colt and Eliza fell into a rhythm. He chopped wood, checked traps, repaired fences. She cooked, cleaned, kept the fire going. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. The work spoke for itself. One afternoon, Colt came back from the woods with a deer slung over his shoulder. Eliza met him at the door, eyes wide. That's a lot of meat. Winter's not over yet. She helped him hang it in the shed, then stood back, wiping her hands on her apron. You're good at this. At what? Surviving. Had a lot of practice. It's more than that. She looked at him, really looked. You don't just survive, you adapt. You don't complain, you just do what needs doing. Colt shrugged. What else is there? Most people give up. I'm not most people, she smiled. No, you're not. That night, they ate venison stew and fresh bread. Eliza had somehow made the cabin feel warmer, not just from the fire, but from the little things. Curtains on the windows, a rug by the door, wildflowers in a jar on the table. Colt noticed. Didn't say anything. But he noticed. After dinner, Eliza cleared the plates and sat back down. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you ever marry? Colt froze, cup halfway to his mouth. That's a hell of a question. You don't have to answer. He set the cup down. Never found a reason to. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. She tilted her head, studying him. I think you're lying. Maybe. So what's the truth? He sighed, rubbed a hand over his face. The truth is, I didn't want to turn into my old man, and I figured the best way to do that was to stay alone. That's a sad way to live. It's a safe way to live. Safe isn't the same as happy. No, but it's predictable. Eliza reached across the table and put her hand over his. It was warm, steady. You're not him, Colt. How do you know? Because you let me in. He looked down at her hand, then up at her face. She wasn't smiling, wasn't joking, just honest. Yeah, he said quietly. I did. Hook. The next morning, everything changed. Colt was outside splitting wood when he heard the hoofbeats. Not from the trail, from the east, through the trees. Fast. He dropped the axe and grabbed his rifle just as a rider burst into the clearing. Young kid, maybe 20, on a lathered horse. He pulled up hard, nearly sliding out of the saddle. Mercer? Who's asking? My name's Tom. I worked for Hargrove. Colt's grip tightened on the rifle. Get off my land. Wait, please, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to warn you. Colt didn't lower the rifle. Warn me about what? Hargrove's coming, tonight, with at least 10 men, maybe more. Eliza appeared in the doorway, rifle in hand. Why are you telling us this? Tom looked at her, then back at Colt. Because what he's doing is wrong. I signed on to work cattle, not hunt people. What's he planning? Colt asked. He's going to burn you out, says if you won't give her up, he'll take her by force. Colt's jaw tightened. He say anything else? Tom hesitated. He said you're a dead man either way, that he's going to make an example out of you. Eliza stepped forward. Why would you risk this? If he finds out you warned us, I know what he'll do, but I can't stand by and watch it happen. Colt studied the kid. He looked scared, but he also looked honest. How much time do we have? Few hours, maybe less. He's gathering men in town now. Colt nodded slowly. All right, get out of here and don't come back. Tom turned his horse, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you make it. Yeah, me too. The kid rode off, disappearing into the trees. Colt turned to Eliza. Her face was pale, but calm. We need to leave, she said. No. Colt, I'm not running. There's 10 of them. I don't care. I do. Her voice cracked. I don't want you to die because of me. Colt set the rifle down and crossed to her. He took her by the shoulders, looked her dead in the eye. Listen to me. If we run, he wins. If we run, he'll keep coming. The only way this ends is if we stand and fight. We can't win. Maybe not, but we can make him wish he'd left us alone. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't want to lose you. You won't. You don't know that. No, but I know I'm not letting him take you. She stared at him, searching his face. Then slowly she nodded. Okay, what do we do? Colt's mind was already racing. We fortify, board up the windows, move everything flammable away from the walls, set traps in the tree line. Traps? Tripwires, noisemakers, anything to slow them down. And if that doesn't work, then we shoot. They worked fast. Colt nailed boards across the windows, leaving narrow gaps to shoot through. Eliza hauled buckets of water from the well, soaking blankets and hanging them over the walls to slow any fire. They moved ammunition inside, stacked it within reach. Colt rigged tripwires in the woods, thin lines tied to pots and pans that would clatter if anyone walked through. He set snares, built false trails, did everything he could to make the approach as loud and difficult as possible. By the time the sun started to set, the cabin was as ready as it was going to be. Colt stood in the center of the room, checking his rifle one last time. Eliza sat at the table, hands folded, staring at nothing. You scared? He asked. Yes. Good. Means you're smart. She looked up at him. Are you scared? Terrified. You don't look it. Years of practice. She stood, walked over to him. If we don't make it, we will. But if we don't, I want you to know something. Colt waited. You gave me something I thought I'd lost. Hope. And I'll never forget that. He swallowed hard. Eliza, I mean it. Before he could say anything else, she leaned up and kissed him. It was brief, soft, and it said everything words couldn't. When she pulled back, Colt's heart was pounding. We're going to make it, he said, voice rough. Promise? I promise. They came just after dark. Colt heard them before he saw them. The faint jingle of harnesses, the creak of saddles, the low murmur of voices. He moved to the window, peered through the gap in the boards. Shadows moved between the trees. A lot of them. They're here, he said quietly. Eliza took her position at the opposite window, rifle ready. Her hands were steady. Her face was set. Colt's heart hammered in his chest, but his mind was clear. He'd been in bad situations before. This was just one more. A voice called out from the darkness, Hargrove's voice. Mercer, last chance. Send her out and we'll let you live. Colt didn't answer. I'm trying to be reasonable. No, you're not, Colt shouted back. You're trying to cover your ass because you know what you did was wrong. Silence. Then Hargrove's voice again, colder this time. Burn it. Colt's stomach dropped. Get down! A torch arced through the air, landed on the roof. Then another and another. Flames erupted above them, crackling and hissing. Smoke poured through the cracks. They're trying to smoke us out, Eliza coughed, covering her mouth. Colt grabbed one of the soaked blankets, threw it over the flames spreading inside. It helped, but not enough. We can't stay here, Eliza shouted. We leave. They'll shoot us. We stay. We burn, Colt cursed, mind racing. Then he saw it. The root cellar door, half hidden under a rug. He'd forgotten about it. Cellar! Now! He yanked the door open. Eliza didn't hesitate. She dropped into the darkness, and Colt followed, slamming the door shut above them. The space was small, cramped, barely enough room for two people, but it was stone. Fireproof. Above them, the cabin roared with flames. Smoke seeped through the cracks. Colt and Eliza pressed close, breathing shallow, waiting. And for the first time, Colt wondered if his promise had been a lie. The heat pressed down from above like a living thing. Colt could feel it through the cellar door, could hear the timber groaning as the fire consumed everything he'd built. Smoke seeped through the cracks in thin, acrid streams. Each breath tasted like ash. Eliza coughed beside him, her shoulder pressed against his in the cramped darkness. Their rifles lay across their laps. There was barely room to move. How long can we stay down here, she whispered. Long as we have to. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Above them, voices shouted. Boots stomped across what was left of the floor. Something heavy crashed. Maybe the table, maybe a beam. Colt couldn't tell. Check inside, someone yelled. Make sure they're dead. Footsteps moved overhead, slow, deliberate, searching. Eliza's hand found Colt's in the dark. She squeezed once, he squeezed back. The footsteps stopped, right above them. Colt held his breath. His finger rested on the trigger. If that door opened, he'd shoot first and sort it out after. A long pause. Then the footsteps moved away. Nothing here, the voice called. Place is gutted. Find the bodies. That was Hargrove. Angry, frustrated. Can't see nothing through the smoke. Then wait for it to clear. More footsteps, moving away, spreading out. Colt let out a slow breath. Eliza's grip on his hand loosened but didn't let go. They think we're dead, she whispered. Good. Let them think it. How long before they figure out we're not? Long enough. The fire raged for another hour, maybe two. Time lost meaning in the dark. Colt's lungs burned, his eyes watered, but the stone cellar held. The heat eventually lessened. The roar of flames faded to crackling, then to silence. Colt waited, listening. Finally he heard horses, riding away. He counted to 100, then another 100. When he was sure they were gone, he pushed the cellar door open. Smoke poured out in a thick cloud. Colt climbed up first, rifle ready, eyes scanning. The cabin was destroyed. Walls blackened and collapsed. Roof gone. Everything he owned, reduced to charred wood and ash. He reached down and helped Eliza up. She emerged coughing, covered in soot, eyes red. She looked around at the ruins and her face went pale. It's all gone. Yeah. Everything you had can be rebuilt. She looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Colt, they burned your home. Home's not the building. It's still standing right here. He tapped his chest. Long as we're breathing, we're not done. Eliza stared at him for a long moment. Then, despite everything, she laughed. Not a happy laugh. A tired, half-broken sound that said she didn't know whether to cry or scream. "You're insane." "Probably." She wiped her eyes, smearing soot across her face. "What now?" Colt looked toward the tree line. Dawn was just starting to break, turning the sky from black to gray. "Now we make them regret this." "How?" "By not dying, and by making sure everyone knows what Hargrove did." "Who's going to believe us?" "We'll find someone." Eliza shook her head. "You don't give up, do you?" "Not when I'm right." They salvaged what they could from the wreckage. Not much survived. A few tins of food buried under rubble. One blanket, scorched but usable. Colt's spare rifle had been in the cellar with them, so at least they were armed. By mid-morning, they were ready to move. "Where are we going?" Eliza asked. "Town." "That's where Hargrove is." "Exactly." She stopped walking. "You want to walk straight into his territory? I want to stand in the middle of the street and tell everyone what he did. Let him try to lie his way out of it in front of witnesses." "He'll kill you." "Maybe, but he'll have to do it in public." Eliza studied him, eyes narrowed. "This is a terrible plan." "You got a better one?" She didn't answer. "Then we go to town." The walk took most of the day. The trail was muddy and slow, still thick with melting snow. Colt's legs ached. His lungs felt raw from the smoke, but he kept moving. Eliza walked beside him, silent and steady. She didn't complain, didn't ask to rest, just kept pace. Around midday, they stopped by a creek to drink and refill their canteens. Eliza knelt by the water, splashed her face, scrubbed at the soot still clinging to her skin. "You think anyone will listen?" she asked. "Some will, some won't. And if they don't? Then we make enough noise that they can't ignore us." She sat back on her heels, looking at him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's right. That's not enough reason to get yourself killed." Colt crouched beside her, dipped his hands in the cold water. "My whole life, I watched people get stepped on, pushed around, treated like they didn't matter. And I told myself it wasn't my problem, that if I kept my head down, stayed out of it, I'd be fine. And I was fine, but I was also alone and miserable. And when I look back, I don't see a single damn thing I'm proud of." Eliza's eyes softened. "This?" Colt gestured vaguely. "Standing up to Hargrove? It's probably stupid, probably going to get me killed, but at least it's something." "It's more than something," Eliza said quietly. "It's everything." He looked at her, really looked, and saw something in her face that made his chest tighten. "Come on," he said, standing. "We got ground to cover." They reached the outskirts of town just before sunset. The place wasn't much. A single street lined with wooden buildings, a general store, a saloon, a church at the far end. Maybe 200 people lived here, if you counted the outlying ranches. Colt stopped at the edge of the street, scanning the buildings. Horses were tied outside the saloon. Smoke rose from chimneys. Everything looked normal. "Stay close," he said. Eliza nodded. They walked down the center of the street side by side. A few people noticed them, an old man sitting outside the general store, a woman sweeping her porch. Their eyes widened when they saw the state Colt and Eliza were in, covered in soot, armed, exhausted. Word spread fast in small towns. By the time they reached the saloon, a small crowd had gathered, curious, wary. Colt stopped in front of the saloon doors and turned to face the crowd. His voice carried, loud and clear. "My name is Colt Mercer. Last night, Samuel Hargrove and his men burned my home to the ground. They tried to kill me and this woman because I wouldn't hand her over like she was livestock." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Some of you know me, some don't. I don't care. What I care about is making sure you know what kind of man Hargrove is. He's not just rich. He's dangerous. And if you think he won't do the same to you when you get in his way, you're lying to yourselves." The saloon doors swung open. A man stepped out, middle-aged, hard-faced, wearing a badge. The sheriff. "That's a serious accusation, Mercer," the sheriff said. "It's the truth. You got proof?" "I got a burned cabin and 10 witnesses who rode with him." The sheriff's eyes flicked to Eliza, then back to Colt. "And her? She your witness?" She's the reason he did it. That's so. The sheriff stepped closer, hand resting on his belt. Not his gun, not yet. Samuel Hargrove says this woman's bound to him by contract. Says she ran off and you're harboring stolen property. She's not property. Law says different. Colt's jaw tightened. Then the law's wrong. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. A few people exchanged glances. The sheriff sighed. Look, Mercer, I don't know what happened between you and Hargrove, but you can't just walk into town making accusations without evidence. I got evidence. It's called the pile of ash where my home used to be. Could have been an accident. It wasn't. Can you prove that? Colt opened his mouth, then closed it. The sheriff had him, and they both knew it. Eliza stepped forward. I can. The sheriff looked at her. How? Because I was there. I saw them throw the torches. I heard Hargrove give the order. And you expect me to take your word over his? I expect you to do your job. The sheriff's face darkened. Careful, ma'am. You're already in enough trouble. What trouble? I didn't break any laws. You broke a contract. A contract that was broken the moment he left me to die in a blizzard. The crowd murmured again, louder this time. People were starting to listen. The sheriff looked around, clearly uncomfortable. This isn't the place for this. Why not? Colt asked. You afraid of what people will think? I'm trying to keep the peace. Peace for who? Us or Hargrove? The sheriff's hand drifted toward his gun. You need to leave. Not until people hear the truth. Mercer. He tried to kill us! Colt's voice rang out, sharp and loud. He burned my home because I wouldn't let him drag this woman back like a dog. And if you're too scared of him to do anything about it, then you're not a sheriff. You're just another man on his payroll. The sheriff's face went red. His hand closed around his gun. The crowd went silent. Colt didn't move, didn't reach for his rifle, just stood there, staring the sheriff down. For a long, tense moment, no one breathed. Then a voice spoke from the crowd. He's telling the truth. Everyone turned. It was Tom, the young ranch hand who'd warned them. He stepped forward, hat in hand, looking pale but determined. I was there, Tom said. I rode with Hargrove's men, and I saw what they did. The sheriff's grip on his gun loosened. Tom? It's true, Sheriff, all of it. Hargrove ordered the fire, said he'd make an example out of Mercer. The crowd erupted. Voices overlapped, some angry, some shocked. The sheriff looked between Tom and Colt, clearly at a loss. Why should I believe you? Because I got nothing to gain by lying. Hargrove will probably kill me for saying this, but I can't keep quiet. Not about this. The sheriff exhaled slowly, then looked at Colt. You got any other witnesses? Just him and her, and the truth. The sheriff rubbed his face, thinking. Finally, he nodded. All right, I'll talk to Hargrove, but you two need to stay out of trouble. We're not the ones causing it, Eliza said. The sheriff ignored her and turned to the crowd. Everyone go home. There's nothing more to see here. The crowd didn't move. I said go home. Slowly, reluctantly, people started to disperse, but they were talking, whispering. The story was spreading. Tom approached Colt, keeping his voice low. You should leave town. Hargrove's going to hear about this, and when he does, I know. Then why are you still here? Because running doesn't solve anything. Tom looked at him like he was crazy. Maybe he was. Where can we stay? Eliza asked. Tom hesitated, then nodded toward a small building at the edge of town. There's a boarding house, run by a widow named Mrs. Calloway. She's fair, doesn't ask questions. Thanks. Tom tipped his hat and walked away quickly, glancing over his shoulder like he expected Hargrove to appear any second. Colt and Eliza made their way to the boarding house. It was small, plain, but clean. A woman in her 50s answered the door, gray hair, sharp eyes, no-nonsense expression. You the ones causing a stir? She asked. That's us, Colt said. She looked them over, taking in the soot and exhaustion. You got money? Colt pulled out a few coins. Not much, but enough. Mrs. Calloway took them and stepped aside. Room's upstairs, second door on the left. No noise, no trouble. Yes, ma'am. She paused as they passed. For what it's worth, I heard what you said out there. Hargrove's had this town by the throat for too long. Maybe it's time someone stood up to him. Colt nodded. Maybe. The room was small. One bed, one chair, a window overlooking the street. Colt set his rifle by the door and collapsed into the chair. Every muscle in his body ached. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap. She looked as tired as he felt. "Do you think the sheriff will do anything?" she asked. "No." "Then why did we come here?" "Because now people know, and that matters." "Does it?" Colt looked at her. "You ever notice how bullies operate? They do their worst in the dark, in private, where no one can see. But the second you drag them into the light, they lose power. Hargrove's not going to just lose power because a few people heard a story. Maybe not, but it's a start." Eliza stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening street. "I don't want you to die for me. I'm not dying for you. I'm living for what's right." She turned to face him. "That's the same thing." "No, it's not." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Eliza crossed the room and sat down in front of him, taking his hands in hers. "I need you to promise me something," she said. "What?" "If this goes bad, if Hargrove comes for us and there's no way out, you run. You leave me and you run." "Not a chance." "Colt!" "I said no." "I'm serious." "So am I." His voice rose sharp and firm. "I didn't come this far to leave you behind, and I'm sure as hell not going to let that bastard win." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Maybe, but I'll do it standing." She shook her head, but she didn't let go of his hands. "You're impossible." "So I've been told." She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. They stayed like that for a long time, breathing together, holding on. Finally, Eliza pulled back. "Get some rest. I'll keep watch." "Eliza, I mean it. You haven't slept in 2 days. I'll wake you if anything happens." Colt wanted to argue, but his body had other ideas. He nodded, stood, and collapsed onto the bed. He was asleep before his head hit the pillow. He woke to shouting. Colt sat up fast, reaching for his rifle. The room was dark. Eliza stood by the window, looking out, her face pale. "What's going on?" "They're here." Colt crossed to the window and looked out. A group of riders had gathered in the street, 10, maybe 12, and at the front, sitting tall on his horse, was Samuel Hargrove. "Mercer!" Hargrove's voice rang out. "I know you're in there. Come out!" Colt's jaw tightened. He grabbed his rifle and checked the load. "Don't," Eliza said. "If you go out there, I have to. He'll kill you." "He'll try." Colt moved toward the door. Eliza grabbed his arm. "Hey, please, don't do this." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he saw fear. Not for herself. For him. "I'll be careful," he said. "That's not good enough. It's all I've got." He pulled free and walked out of the room, down the stairs, and into the street. Hargrove sat on his horse, flanked by armed men. His face was calm, cold, the kind of calm that came before violence. "You made a mistake coming here, Mercer," Hargrove said. "Funny. I was going to say the same thing." Hargrove smiled. "You really think you can stand against me? You're one man. One man's enough when he's right. Right doesn't win wars. Power does." "Then let's find out." Hargrove's smile faded. "Last chance. Walk away. Leave the woman, and I'll let you live." "No." "Then you're a fool." "Better a fool than a coward." Hargrove's hand moved toward his gun. And then the sheriff stepped out of the shadows, rifle in hand. "That's enough, Samuel." Hargrove froze. "Stay out of this, Sheriff." "Can't do that. Not when you're threatening a man in my town. This is between me and Mercer." "No, it's not. Not anymore." The sheriff wasn't alone. Tom stood behind him, and Mrs. Calloway, and a dozen others from town, all armed, all standing together. Hargrove looked around, his expression darkening. "You're all making a mistake." "Maybe," the sheriff said, "but we're making it together." Hargrove stared at them for a long moment. Then he turned his horse and rode away, his men following. The street fell silent. Colt lowered his rifle, breathing hard. The sheriff walked over, shook his hand. "You got guts, Mercer. Stupid guts, but guts." "Thanks, I think." The sheriff smiled faintly. "Get some rest. This isn't over. But tonight, you won. Colt nodded. He turned and walked back inside where Eliza was waiting. She didn't say anything, just threw her arms around him and held on tight. And for the first time in days, Colt felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to make it. But hope had a short shelf life in a place like this. Morning came too bright, too clear. Colt woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Eliza asleep in the chair, rifle across her lap. She'd kept watch all night despite his protests. Her head was tilted at an awkward angle, dark circles under her eyes. He stood slowly, careful not to wake her, and moved to the window. The street below was quiet. Normal. Like nothing had happened. But Colt knew better. Hargrove wasn't done. Men like him didn't walk away from humiliation. They doubled down. Eliza stirred behind him. "What time is it?" "Early. You should have woken me. You needed sleep more than I did." She stretched, wincing. Besides, nothing happened. Yet, she stood and joined him at the window. For a moment they just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, watching the town wake up. A shopkeeper swept his porch. A woman carried a basket toward the general store. Everything looked peaceful. "Do you think they'll really stand with us?" Eliza asked. "When it comes down to it, some will, some won't. People are complicated." "That's not an answer. It's the truth." She sighed. "I hate that you're right." A knock at the door made them both turn. Colt grabbed his rifle, moved to the side. "Who is it?" "Mrs. Calloway?" He relaxed slightly and opened the door. The widow stood there with a tray, bread, eggs, coffee. The smell hit him like a punch. "Figured you two could use a proper meal," she said. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I wanted to." She set the tray on the small table. "Besides, word's spreading fast. Half the town's talking about what happened last night. The other half's pretending they didn't see anything." "Which half are you?" Eliza asked. Mrs. Calloway smiled. "The half that's tired of watching Samuel Hargrove treat people like dirt." She moved toward the door, then paused. "You two be careful. He's not going to let this go." "We know," Colt said. "Good. Because knowing and preparing are two different things." She left, closing the door softly behind her. Eliza sat down and picked up a piece of bread. "She's right. We need a plan." "We had a plan. It worked." "For one night. What about the next? And the one after that?" She set the bread down, untouched. "We can't just wait for him to make the next move." "So what do you suggest?" "We find proof, real proof, something the sheriff can't ignore." Colt poured himself coffee, thinking. "What kind of proof?" "I don't know, but there has to be something. Men like Hargrove don't get this powerful without leaving a trail." "A trail of what? Burned homes? Broken contracts? People too scared to talk?" Eliza's jaw tightened. "Then we make them talk." "How?" "By giving them a reason to believe it's safe." Colt sat down across from her. "You're talking about turning this whole town against him. I'm talking about showing them they have a choice. People don't choose when they're scared. They do if someone leads them." He looked at her, really looked. There was something different in her eyes. Not hope, exactly. Something harder, determination. "You've changed," he said. "So have you. How do you figure?" "You're still here. A month ago you would have told me to leave and gone back to hiding in the woods." She wasn't wrong. Colt rubbed his jaw, feeling the rough stubble. "What do you want to do?" "Talk to people. Find out what they know. Who else Hargrove's hurt? Build a case so strong even the sheriff can't look away. And if we don't find anything, then we keep looking." Colt smiled despite himself. "You're stubborn as hell. Takes one to know one." They spent the morning moving through town, carefully, deliberately, talking to anyone who would listen. The blacksmith, a man named Henry with arms like tree trunks, said Hargrove had bought his land out from under him 3 years ago, paid half what it was worth and threatened to burn the forge if Henry didn't sign. The seamstress, a quiet woman named Clara, said Hargrove had propositioned her twice. When she refused, he spread rumors that ruined her business for months. The general store owner, an older man named Dutch, said Hargrove controlled the prices on everything that came through town. If you didn't buy from him, you didn't buy at all. Each story was different, but the theme was the same. Hargrove took what he wanted, and anyone who stood in his way got crushed. By midday, Colt and Eliza had a list. Not evidence exactly, but enough to paint a picture. They met with the sheriff in his office, a cramped room that smelled like tobacco and old paper. He listened, arms crossed, face unreadable. "That's a lot of accusations," he said when they finished. "They're not accusations. They're facts. Facts without proof. We have witnesses. Witnesses who are terrified of retribution." The sheriff leaned back in his chair. "Look, I believe you. I do. But belief doesn't hold up in court." "Then what does?" Eliza asked. "Documents? Contracts? Something written down that proves illegal activity?" Colt frowned. "You think Hargrove's stupid enough to write down his crimes?" "No, but he's arrogant enough to think no one will ever look." Eliza leaned forward. "Where would he keep something like that?" "His ranch. He's got an office there. Keeps all his business records locked up tight." "Then that's where we go." The sheriff laughed. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" "You're talking about breaking into Samuel Hargrove's home. I'm talking about finding the truth." The sheriff shook his head. "That's suicide." "Maybe. But sitting here doing nothing is surrender." The sheriff studied her for a long moment. Then he looked at Colt. "You're really going to let her do this?" "I'm not letting her do anything. She makes her own choices." "And yours?" "I'm going with her." The sheriff cursed under his breath. "You're both insane." "Probably," Colt said. "But we're also right." The sheriff stood, paced to the window. He stared out at the street, silent. Finally, he turned back. "If I help you, it's off the record. Officially, I don't know anything about this." "Agreed. And if you get caught, I can't protect you." "We're not asking you to." The sheriff sighed. "Hargrove's got guards. At least 4, maybe more. They patrol the property day and night." "What about inside the house?" "He's got a housekeeper, cook. Both live on the property. The office is on the second floor, east wing. There's a safe. I don't know the combination." Eliza glanced at Colt. "Can you open a safe?" "I can try." The sheriff pulled a piece of paper from his desk and sketched a rough map. "Best time to go is early morning, just before dawn. Guards are tired. Kitchen staff aren't awake yet." "How do we get in?" "Servant's entrance, back of the house. It's usually unlocked because the cook comes in early to start breakfast." Colt took the map, studied it. "This is a long shot." "It's the only shot you've got," Mokok. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Colt checked their rifles, cleaned them, loaded them. Eliza gathered supplies. Rope, a small knife, matches. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. That night they sat in the boarding house room, neither of them sleeping. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Each second felt like an hour. "You scared?" Colt asked. "Terrified." "Good. Why is that good?" "Because if you're not scared, you're not paying attention." Eliza smiled faintly. "And you? Are you scared?" "More than I've been in a long time." "But you're still going." "Yeah." "Why?" Colt thought about it, really thought. "Because for the first time in my life, I'm fighting for something that matters. Not just survival, something bigger." "What?" He looked at her. "You." Eliza's breath caught. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. "If we don't make it, we will. But if we don't, I want you to know something." "What?" "You saved me. Not just from the snow, from giving up, from believing I didn't matter." Colt's throat tightened. "You've always mattered." "I didn't think so." "Not until I met you." They sat in silence, hands clasped, the weight of what was coming settling over them like a heavy blanket. Finally, Colt stood. "We should get moving. Sun'll be up in a few hours." Eliza nodded. She grabbed her rifle and followed him out into the cold, dark night. The ride to Hargrove's ranch took an hour. They'd borrowed horses from the sheriff, quiet, steady animals that didn't spook easy. The moon was a thin sliver, barely giving enough light to see by. As they approached the property, Colt slowed. The ranch was massive. Sprawling fields, multiple barns, a house that looked more like a mansion. Lights burned in a few windows despite the hour. They dismounted a quarter-mile out and moved on foot, keeping low, staying in the shadows. Colt's heart pounded in his chest. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot. They reached the tree line and crouched, watching. 2 guards patrolled the front of the house, moving in slow, lazy circles. Another stood by the barn, smoking a cigarette. 3 we can see, Colt whispered. Probably more inside. The servants' entrance? Back of the house. Come on. They circled wide, staying in the trees. It took 20 minutes to reach the back. The servants' entrance was exactly where the sheriff said it would be, a plain wooden door slightly ajar. Colt tested it. It swung open with a faint creak. He froze, listening. Nothing. He slipped inside, Eliza right behind him. They were in a narrow hallway, dark, quiet, the smell of old wood and lye soap. Stairs should be to the left, Eliza whispered, consulting the map by moonlight filtering through a window. They moved carefully, every step deliberate. The house was eerily silent. Colt's hand stayed on his rifle, finger near the trigger. They found the stairs and climbed. Each step groaned under their weight. Colt winced, but there was no other way. At the top, a long hallway stretched in both directions, doors on either side. Most were closed. East wing, Eliza said, pointing. They moved down the hall. Colt counted doors. 1, 2, 3. The 4th one had light seeping under the crack. They stopped. Listened. Voices. Faint. Coming from inside. Colt's stomach dropped. Someone's in there. Who? Don't know. They pressed against the wall, straining to hear. 2 voices. One was Hargrove, the other Colt didn't recognize. I don't care what it costs, Hargrove was saying. I want them gone. Both of them. You're talking about murder. The second voice was older, uncertain. I'm talking about solving a problem. This isn't a problem. It's 2 people who refuse to roll over. Exactly. And if I let them get away with it, everyone else will think they can do the same. So you kill them? In front of the whole town? Not in front of anyone. Make it look like an accident, a fire, a fall. I don't care. Just make it happen. Silence. Then the older voice again. I didn't sign on for this. You signed on for whatever I tell you to sign on for. I'm done, Samuel. Find someone else. Footsteps. Moving toward the door. Colt grabbed Eliza's arm and pulled her into a side room just as the door opened. An older man stepped out, gray hair, worn coat, face lined with regret. He walked down the hall without looking back. Colt waited until he was gone, then peered into the office. Hargrove sat at a desk, pouring himself a drink. His back was to the door. Colt made a split-second decision. He stepped into the room, rifle raised. Don't move. Hargrove froze, glass halfway to his lips. He set it down slowly and turned. Mercer, I should have known. Stand up, slow. Hargrove did. He didn't look scared, didn't look surprised, just annoyed. You're making a mistake, he said. Funny. That's what everyone keeps telling me. Eliza stepped into the room, keeping her rifle trained on Hargrove. Where's the safe? Hargrove smiled. You think breaking into my home and pointing guns at me is going to solve your problems? No, but finding proof of what you've done will. Proof of what? Running a successful business? Proof of extortion, fraud, attempted murder. Hargrove laughed. You're grasping at straws. Am I? Eliza gestured to the desk. Then you won't mind if we look. Hargrove's smile faded. Touch my desk and you're both dead. Already tried that. Didn't work. Colt moved to the desk, keeping his rifle trained on Hargrove with one hand while using the other to rifle through papers, contracts, land deeds, bills of sale, all legal, all clean. Then he found a ledger, handwritten, detailed. He opened it, scanned the pages, names, dates, amounts, payments marked enforcement, threats documented in Hargrove's own hand. Eliza, look at this. She glanced over, eyes widening. That's it. That's proof. Hargrove lunged. Colt swung the rifle up, but Hargrove was fast. He grabbed the barrel, twisted. The gun went off, deafening in the small room. The bullet punched into the ceiling. Hargrove shoved Colt back, hard. Colt stumbled, hit the wall. Hargrove reached for a pistol on his desk. Eliza fired. The shot was loud. Final. Hargrove staggered, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped through his fingers. He dropped the pistol and fell back into his chair, breathing hard. You shot me, he said, almost disbelieving. Eliza's hands shook, but she didn't lower the rifle. You were going to kill him. You won't get away with this. We already have. Footsteps pounded down the hall. Guards, shouting. Colt grabbed the ledger, shoved it inside his coat. We need to move. Now! They bolted from the room, down the hall. The guards burst through the front entrance as Colt and Eliza hit the stairs. Gunfire erupted, wood splintered. Colt fired back, not aiming, just covering. They made it to the servants' entrance, burst outside. The horses were gone, spooked by the gunfire. Run! Colt shouted. They sprinted into the trees, bullets whipped past, tearing through branches. Colt's lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he kept moving. Behind them, voices yelled, orders, chaos. They ran for what felt like hours. Finally, deep in the woods, they collapsed behind a fallen tree, gasping for air. Eliza clutched her rifle, hands still shaking. Did we really just do that? Yeah, I shot him. You saved my life. I shot someone. Colt reached over, took her hand. You did what you had to do. And because of it, we have what we need. He pulled the ledger from his coat. Even in the dim light, the pages were clear. Damning. This is it, he said. This is what we came for. Eliza stared at it, then at him. Now what? Now we get this to the sheriff, and we make Hargrove answer for everything. They made it back to town just before dawn, exhausted, filthy, but alive. The sheriff met them at his office, took one look at their condition, and cursed. What the hell happened? Colt handed him the ledger. Read it. The sheriff flipped through the pages, his expression darkening with every line. Where did you get this? Hargrove's office. You broke into his ranch. We did what we had to do. The sheriff set the ledger down, rubbed his face. This is enough. More than enough. I can bring charges. Maybe even get the territorial marshal involved. Do it, Eliza said. The sheriff looked at her, then at Colt. You two understand what this means? Once I file this, there's no going back. Hargrove will fight, and he'll fight dirty. Let him, Colt said. The sheriff nodded slowly. All right, but you two need to lay low. If Hargrove knows you have this, he knows we shot him. The sheriff's eyes went wide. You what? He went for a gun. Eliza fired. He's alive, but he's hurt. The sheriff's face went pale. You're telling me you broke into his home, stole his ledger, and shot him? That about covers it. The sheriff laughed. It was a tired, half-crazy sound. You two are insane. So we've heard, but news spread through town like wildfire. By midday, everyone knew. Hargrove was wounded. His ledger was in the sheriff's hands. Charges were being filed. The town divided. Some stood with Colt and Eliza. Others sided with Hargrove out of fear or loyalty or greed. Arguments broke out in the streets. Tensions ran high. But something else happened too. People started talking, sharing stories, admitting what Hargrove had done to them. The blacksmith, the seamstress, the store owner. One by one, they came forward, and the tide began to turn. 3 days later, the territorial marshal arrived, a hard man with a harder reputation. He reviewed the ledger, interviewed witnesses, and within a week, issued a warrant for Hargrove's arrest. Colt and Eliza watched from the boarding house window as the marshal and his deputies rode toward Hargrove's ranch. They didn't speak, just stood there, waiting. Hours passed. Then the marshal returned. Hargrove was in custody, wounded but alive, facing charges that would put him away for years. The street erupted. Cheers. Relief. People spilled out of buildings, celebrating like they'd won a war. Maybe they had. Colt turned to Eliza. She was crying, not sad tears, relieved ones. We did it, she whispered. You did it. No, we did. He pulled her close, held her tight, and for the first time since the night she knocked on his door, Colt Mercer felt something he'd forgotten existed. Peace. Peace, as it turned out, was harder to hold on to than anger. The town celebrated for 3 days. Drinks flowed freely at the saloon. People who'd barely spoken to each other in years shook hands and slapped backs. Even the sheriff cracked a smile, which Colt figured was the closest thing to a miracle he'd ever witness. But underneath the celebration, there was unease. Hargrove was in custody, sure, but his ranch still stood. His men were still around. And his money, all that money, hadn't disappeared just because the marshal slapped chains on him. Colt felt it the fourth morning when the celebrations had died down and the town returned to something like normal. He stood outside the boarding house, watching people go about their business, and noticed the glances. Some grateful, some resentful, more than a few uncertain. Eliza joined him, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She passed him one without a word. They'd fallen into this rhythm over the past weeks, comfortable silences punctuated by moments that mattered. "You look worried," she said, just thinking. "About? What comes next?" She sipped her coffee. "Hargrove's going to trial. The marshal said it's open and shut." "That's not what I mean. Then what?" Colt gestured toward the street. "Look at them. They're happy now. But what happens when the dust settles? When they realize standing up to one rich bastard doesn't fix all their problems? Maybe it doesn't have to fix everything. Maybe it just had to start something. And if it doesn't?" Eliza turned to face him. "Then we keep going, just like we've been doing." The way she said "we" made something tighten in his chest. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar, like wearing new boots that hadn't broken in yet. "I need to rebuild the cabin," he said after a moment. "I know. Can't keep staying in Mrs. Calloway's place forever." "I know that too." "It's going to take time. Weeks, maybe months." Eliza set her cup down on the porch railing. "Are you trying to tell me something?" "I'm trying to figure out what you want." "What I want?" "Yeah, you're free now. Hargrove's locked up. You can go anywhere. Be anything. You don't have to He stopped, searching for the right words. "Have to what? Stay with you?" He didn't answer, didn't know how. Eliza stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Do you want me to leave?" "No." "Then stop trying to give me reasons to." "I'm not." "You are. You've been doing it since the day we met, pushing me away, telling me all the reasons this won't work. Well, I'm tired of it." Colt opened his mouth, then closed it. She was right. He'd spent so long protecting himself that he'd forgotten how to let someone in. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Do what?" "This. Us. Whatever this is." Eliza's expression softened. "Neither do I, so we'll figure it out together." Before he could respond, the sheriff appeared at the end of the street, walking toward them with purpose. His face was serious. "We got a problem," he said when he reached them. Colt's hand instinctively went to his belt, where his gun usually sat. "What kind of problem?" "Hargrove's lawyer showed up this morning, big city type, already filing motions to dismiss the charges." "On what grounds?" "Says the ledger was obtained illegally, that you broke into Hargrove's home without a warrant and stole his property." Eliza's jaw tightened. "That ledger proves he's guilty." "Doesn't matter if it can't be used in court. That's insane." The sheriff shrugged. "That's the law." Colt felt the anger building but kept his voice level. "What about the witnesses? All those people who came forward?" "Lawyers claiming they're unreliable, says they have personal grudges and financial motives to lie." "So Hargrove just walks?" "Not walks, but the marshal's worried. Says without the ledger, the case gets a lot harder to prove." Colt looked at Eliza. She looked back, and he saw the same thing in her eyes that he felt in his gut. This wasn't over. "What do we do?" she asked. The sheriff scratched his jaw. "Honestly, I don't know. The lawyer's good, real good, and Hargrove's got money to drag this out for years if he wants. There has to be something." "There is, but you're not going to like it. Tell me anyway." The sheriff hesitated. "Hargrove wants to make a deal." Colt's blood went cold. "What kind of deal?" "He drops his complaint about the break-in, accepts a lesser charge, pays a fine, does maybe 6 months." 6 months, Colt repeated flatly, "for everything he's done. And in exchange, this whole thing goes away. No trial, no public spectacle. Everyone moves on. Everyone except the people he hurt." "I know, but the alternative is a trial that might not go our way, and if Hargrove beats this, he comes back more powerful than ever." Eliza's hands curled into fists. "So we just let him win?" "I'm saying you need to think about whether fighting this is worth the risk." Colt stared at the sheriff for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. He ended up at the ruins of his cabin. The charred timbers still stood in places,
black and skeletal against the snow. Everything he'd owned was ash now. Everything except what mattered. He heard footsteps behind him, knew without turning it was Eliza. "You can't just walk away from conversations," she said. Wasn't walking away. Was thinking. About what? About how nothing ever really changes. Men like Hargrove always find a way to win. Even when they lose, they win. Eliza came and stood beside him. "So what? We give up?" "I didn't say that." "Then what are you saying?" Colt picked up a piece of charred wood, turned it over in his hands. "I'm saying maybe the sheriff's right. Maybe we need to think about whether this fight is worth it." "Of course it's worth it." "Is it?" "Look around, Eliza. My home's gone. We almost died. Multiple times. And for what? So Hargrove can pay a fine and walk away? So other people know they can stand up too. So the next time someone like him tries to push people around, they remember what happened here." "That's a nice thought, but thoughts don't rebuild cabins." Eliza was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're scared." "Damn right I'm scared. Not of Hargrove, of this, of us, of having something to lose." Colt threw the wood down. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? Every time something good happens, you find a reason to sabotage it. It's like you think you don't deserve it." "Maybe I don't." "That's bullshit and you know it." He turned to face her. "You want the truth? Fine. I'm terrified. Terrified that I'm going to fail you, that I'm going to let you down like I've let down everyone else in my life. And yeah, maybe it'd be easier if you just left, because then at least I wouldn't have to watch it happen." Eliza stared at him. Then, without warning, she slapped him. Not hard, but enough to snap his head to the side. "What the hell?" "You're a coward," she said. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. You'll face down armed men. You'll burn your own home to the ground before giving up. But when it comes to letting someone care about you, you run." "I'm not running." "You are. And I'm done letting you." She stepped closer, jabbing a finger into his chest. "I didn't survive a blizzard, a burning cabin, and breaking into Hargrove's ranch just to watch you throw it all away because you're scared of being happy." "Eliza, no, you don't get to talk, you get to listen." Her voice cracked. "I love you. And I know you love me too, even if you're too stubborn to say it. So stop trying to push me away and start figuring out how we move forward, together." Colt stood there, speechless. The wind blew cold across the valley. Snow crunched under their feet. Finally, he said, "I'm not good at this. I know. I'm going to mess it up." "Probably. And you still want to try?" "More than anything." He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. She smelled like smoke and soap and something that was just her. "I don't deserve you. Good thing I don't care what you think you deserve." They stood like that for a long time, holding on to each other in the wreckage of what used to be. And slowly, carefully, Colt let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he could build something better. They went back to town with the decision made. No deal. They'd fight Hargrove in court, lawyer and all, and let the truth speak for itself. The sheriff wasn't happy about it. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Good," Colt said. "Nothing worth doing is easy." The trial was set for 3 weeks out. In that time, Colt and Eliza worked. They talked to witnesses, gathered statements, prepared testimony. The lawyer Hargrove hired was slick and expensive, but the marshal brought in a prosecutor who'd cut his teeth on corruption cases in Denver. The night before the trial, Colt couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed in the boarding house, staring at the floor. Eliza woke, saw him, and sat up. "What's wrong?" "Just thinking about tomorrow." "Nervous?" "Yeah." "Me too." "What if it doesn't work? What if the jury sides with him?" Eliza reached over and took his hand. "Then we'll figure out what's next. But we won't give up." "How are you so sure?" "Because I've already lost everything once. I know what that feels like. And I know that as long as I have you, I can survive anything." Colt looked at her, really looked, and he realized something he'd been avoiding for weeks. "Marry me." Eliza blinked. "What?" "Marry me. Not because you have to, not because of some contract or arrangement, but because you want to." "Colt, this is crazy." "I know, but I'm tired of waiting for the right time.
There is no right time. There's just now, and I want you for as long as you'll have me. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. You're serious. Never been more serious in my life. She laughed, a broken, beautiful sound. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her then, soft and careful and full of promises he intended to keep. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Colt Mercer felt something close to hope. The trial started on a cold Monday morning. The courthouse was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the back, pressed against the walls. The town had never seen anything like it. Hargrove sat at the defendant's table, shoulder bandaged, face hard. His lawyer was a tall man with slicked back hair and a three-piece suit that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Colt and Eliza sat in the front row behind the prosecutor. The marshal sat with them, arms crossed, face unreadable. The judge was an older woman with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. She called the court to order and the trial began. The prosecution went first. They laid out the case methodically. The ledger, the witness statements, the pattern of intimidation and extortion. It was damning. Then Hargrove's lawyer stood up. He was good. Real good. He picked apart every piece of evidence, questioned every witness's credibility, suggested alternative explanations for everything. The ledger? Could have been forged. The witnesses? Jealous competitors with axes to grind. The shooting? Self-defense against intruders. By the third day, the momentum had shifted. The jury looked uncertain. Whispers spread through the crowd. Colt felt it slipping away. On the fourth day, the prosecution called Eliza to the stand. She walked up slowly, hands steady, head high. The lawyer administered the oath. She swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor started with easy questions. Her name, where she came from, how she ended up in Montana. Then he asked about Hargrove. Eliza's voice didn't waver. She described the contract, the journey west, the way Hargrove had treated her like property, the moment he left her in the snow to die. The courtroom was silent. Then Hargrove's lawyer stood for cross-examination. Miss Whitlock, you claim my client abandoned you in a blizzard. It's not a claim, it's what happened. But you have no proof of this, do you? No witnesses? I'm the witness. A witness with a clear bias against my client. A witness who's telling the truth. The lawyer smiled. You're also a woman who broke a legally binding contract. Isn't that correct? I broke a contract that was violated the moment he tried to kill me. Tried to kill you? That's a serious accusation. Do you have any evidence? I'm alive. That's evidence enough. Or perhaps you simply ran away when things didn't go as you expected. And now you're trying to ruin an innocent man's reputation to justify your own actions. Eliza's jaw tightened. There's nothing innocent about Samuel Hargrove. That's your opinion. It's the truth. The lawyer leaned against the railing. Miss Whitlock, isn't it true that you're engaged to Mr. Mercer? The prosecutor stood. Objection. Relevance? Goes to bias, Your Honor. The judge considered. I'll allow it. The lawyer turned back to Eliza. So? Are you engaged? Yes. And Mr. Mercer was the one who broke into my client's home and stole his property, correct? He was gathering evidence of crimes. Crimes you claim happened. Crimes that conveniently justify both your broken contract and his illegal actions. They're not claims, they're facts. Facts you can't prove. Eliza's hands gripped the armrests of the witness chair. Colt could see her struggling to stay calm. I can prove them, she said quietly. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. How? Because I'm not the only one he did this to. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. Order! The lawyer looked thrown. Your Honor, this is— Let her speak, the judge said. Eliza turned to face the jury. Samuel Hargrove has been doing this for years, bringing women out here under false pretenses, treating them like they're disposable. I know because I've talked to them. 3 other women, all with the same story, all too scared to come forward because they thought no one would believe them. The lawyer's face went red. Your Honor, this is hearsay. It's testimony, the prosecutor cut in, and we have those women ready to testify if needed. The judge looked at the prosecutor. Is that true? Yes, Your Honor. Then call them. Over the next 2 days, 3 more women took the stand, Each told a similar story. Brought to Montana, promised a new life, discarded when they didn't meet expectations. One had been abandoned in town with no money and no way home. Another had been threatened when she tried to leave. A third had been physically thrown off Hargrove's property. Each story chipped away at Hargrove's facade. By the time the prosecution rested, the jury looked sick. Hargrove's lawyer tried to fight back. He brought character witnesses, business partners who swore Hargrove was a pillar of the community, but it rang hollow against the testimony of the women. On the 8th day, closing arguments began. The prosecutor was brief. The defense wants you to believe this is about a business dispute, a contract disagreement, but it's not. It's about power. And what happens when someone with power decides that people are things to be bought and sold and thrown away? The evidence is clear. The testimony is consistent. Samuel Hargrove is guilty, and it's time he answers for what he's done. Hargrove's lawyer spoke for an hour. He talked about reasonable doubt, about the burden of proof, about how the prosecution's case relied on emotion rather than facts. But Colt could see it in the jury's faces. They'd already made up their minds. The judge sent them to deliberate. They were back in 2 hours, guilty on all counts. The courtroom exploded. Hargrove's face went white. His lawyer immediately started talking about appeals, but the judge cut him off. Mr. Hargrove, you've been found guilty of fraud, extortion, and attempted murder. I'm sentencing you to 20 years in the territorial prison. Bailiff, take him into custody. Hargrove stood, chains rattling. He looked at Colt, then at Eliza. His expression was pure hatred. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, Colt replied. It is. The bailiff led him away, and just like that, it was done. The town celebrated again, but this time it felt different, not just relief, something deeper, like they'd all been holding their breath for years and finally exhaled. Colt and Eliza didn't join the celebration. They walked back to the ruins of the cabin, hand in hand, silent. When they got there, Colt stopped and looked around, at the charred wood, the broken foundation, the empty space where his life used to be. What are you thinking? Eliza asked. That I need to start over. She corrected. We need to start over. He smiled. Yeah, we. They spent the next 3 months rebuilding, not just the cabin, everything. Colt worked from dawn to dusk, cutting timber, laying foundation stones, raising walls. Eliza worked beside him, measuring, hammering, doing whatever needed doing. They weren't alone. People from town came to help. The blacksmith, the seamstress, the store owner, even the sheriff showed up one Saturday with a wagon load of supplies. Consider it a wedding gift, he said. We haven't had a wedding yet. Then consider it incentive to hurry up. They were married on a warm spring day 6 months after Hargrove's trial. Nothing fancy, just a simple ceremony in the town square, officiated by the judge who'd presided over the case. Half the town showed up. Eliza wore a dress Mrs. Calloway had sewn for her. Simple, practical, beautiful. Colt wore clean clothes and boots that didn't have holes in them for the first time in years. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Colt kissed Eliza like it was the first and last time all at once. The crowd cheered, and in that moment, standing in the middle of a town that had learned to stand up for itself, Colt Mercer understood something he'd been too scared to admit before. He wasn't alone anymore, and he never would be again. The cabin was finished by midsummer. It was bigger than the old one, stronger, built to last. They moved in on a Saturday, spent the first night on the floor because they hadn't finished building the bed yet. Didn't matter. They had a roof, they had walls, they had each other. Over the next year, life settled into a rhythm. Colt worked the land. Eliza started teaching children in town, first from their cabin, then from a small schoolhouse the town built with money confiscated from Hargrove's estate. People came to them with problems, disputes, questions, advice. Somehow, without meaning to, Colt and Eliza had become the people others looked to. It was strange, uncomfortable at first, but gradually they grew into it. 2 years after the trial, Eliza gave birth to a daughter. They named her Hope. Colt held her for the first time and felt something crack open inside him. Not break. Open. Like a door he'd kept locked his whole life, finally swinging wide. She's perfect, Eliza whispered. Yeah, Colt said, voice rough. She is. A son followed 18 months later. Then another daughter. The cabin filled with noise and chaos and life. The valley changed too. New families moved in. The town grew. The shadow Hargrove had cast faded, replaced by something brighter. People talked about the trial like it was a turning point, the moment they stopped being afraid. Colt didn't know about all that. He just knew his life was different, better, fuller. 10 years passed. Colt stood on the porch of the cabin, watching his children play in the yard. Hope was 12 now, tall and serious, teaching her younger brother how to shoot. The boy was terrible at it, but he kept trying. Their youngest, a girl of 8, was chasing chickens and laughing. Eliza came out drying her hands on her apron. She'd aged in those 10 years. Lines at the corners of her eyes, silver threading through her dark hair, but she was still the most beautiful thing Colt had ever seen. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." She leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They stood like that, watching their children, the valley stretching out beyond. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" Eliza asked. "All the time." And I'm grateful." "For what?" "For you knocking on my door, for being too stubborn to give up, for teaching me that running doesn't solve anything." Eliza smiled. "You taught me some things, too." "Like what?" "Like how to fight, how to stand up, how to believe I was worth fighting for it." Colt kissed the top of her head. "You were always worth it. So were you." A rider appeared on the trail. Old, thin, riding slow. As he got closer, Colt recognized him. Samuel Hargrove. Colt's hand instinctively went to his belt, but he wasn't wearing a gun. Hadn't needed one in years. Eliza felt him tense. "What's wrong?" "We got company." She looked and went still. "What's he doing here?" "Don't know." Hargrove rode into the yard and stopped. He looked terrible. Gaunt. Broken. Like someone had hollowed him out and left just the shell. He dismounted slowly, wincing. "Mercer." "Hargrove." "I'm not here to cause trouble." "Then why are you here?" Hargrove looked around. At the cabin, the barn, the children playing. His expression was unreadable. "I got out 2 months ago. Early release for good behavior." He laughed, bitter. "Isn't that something? Good behavior." Colt said nothing. "I came back to the valley. Thought maybe I could start over. But everything's gone. My ranch, my money, my name, all of it." He paused. "I heard you rebuilt. Thought maybe what? Maybe you'd sell me this land." Colt stared at him. Then he laughed. Not mean, just incredulous. "You're serious?" "I can pay. Not much, but no." Hargrove's face hardened. "I wasn't asking for charity. And I'm not selling. This land's mine. I built it with my own hands. My family lives here. You think I'd give that up for any amount of money? I just need a place to start over." "Then start somewhere else." Hargrove looked at him for a long moment, then at Eliza, then at the children. "You won," he said quietly. "You took everything from me." "No," Colt said. "You lost it all on your own. I just made sure you couldn't hurt anyone else while you did it." Hargrove's shoulders slumped. He looked old, defeated. "I don't have anywhere to go. That's not my problem." "Colt," Eliza said softly. He looked at her. She was watching Hargrove with something that wasn't quite pity, but close. "He's got nothing," she said. "He had everything, and he threw it away." "I know, but that doesn't mean we have to." Colt frowned. "What are you saying?" She turned to Hargrove. "There's a boarding house in town, run by a widow named Mrs. Calloway. She's fair. Might have a room if you can pay." "I can work—" "I'm not done," Eliza cut him off. "You stay away from us. You stay away from this land. You don't speak to me or my husband unless we speak first. And if I hear you've hurt anyone at all, I'll make sure you go back to prison for the rest of your life. Understand?" Hargrove nodded slowly. "I understand." "Good. Now leave." He climbed back on his horse and rode away without another word. Colt watched him go, then turned to Eliza. "Why'd you do that?" "Because someone once gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve it, and it saved my life." He tried to kill you. I know, but he's already paid for that, and I'm not going to let him turn me into someone who kicks people when they're down. Colt shook his head. You're better than me. No, I'm just tired of carrying hate around. It's heavy, and I've got better things to hold on to. She reached for his hand. He took it. And standing there, watching the sun set over the valley they'd fought so hard to protect, Colt understood something fundamental about the life they'd built. It wasn't about revenge or justice or even winning. It was about choosing every single day to be the kind of people who built things instead of tearing them down, who stood up for what was right even when it was hard, who believed that people, broken, flawed, imperfect people, could change if they were given a reason to. Hargrove probably wouldn't change. Colt knew that. But Eliza's mercy wasn't about him. It was about her, about refusing to let bitterness poison what they'd created. 5 more years passed. The valley thrived. The town grew into something real, with a proper school, a church that people actually attended, a doctor who'd moved in from back east. Eliza's schoolhouse had expanded twice. She taught 30 children now, and every one of them knew how to read and write and think for themselves. Colt served on the town council. Never planned to, never wanted to, but people kept asking, and eventually he stopped saying no. He wasn't good at politics, but he was good at fairness. And that seemed to be enough. Their children grew. Hope talked about becoming a teacher like her mother. The boy wanted to be a rancher. The youngest wanted to be everything at once. One evening, Colt and Eliza sat on the porch, watching the stars come out. The children were asleep inside. The valley was quiet. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Eliza asked. Sometimes. Like what? Like if you hadn't knocked on my door that night, if I hadn't let you in, if we'd given up at any point along the way. We'd be different people. Yeah, lonelier ones. Eliza rested her head on his shoulder. I'm glad you didn't leave me in the snow. I'm glad you didn't give up on me when I tried to push you away. We're a pair, aren't we? The stubbornest pair in Montana. She laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Eliza said, Do you think we made a difference? What do you mean? With everything. The trial. Hargrove, the town. Do you think it mattered? Colt thought about it. I think we showed people that standing up is possible, that one person or 2 people can make a difference if they're willing to pay the price. And was it worth the price? He looked at her, at the life they'd built, at the children sleeping inside, at the community that had formed around them. Every damn bit of it. The story of Colt and Eliza became legend in the valley, not the sanitized version that got told around campfires. The real one, messy, complicated, full of mistakes and fear and moments when everything almost fell apart. People told it to their children, and their children told it to theirs. And each telling added something new, took something away, changed it just enough that the truth got mixed with the myth. But the core remained. A woman knocked on a door in a blizzard. A man let her in, and together they proved that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. It's about standing up even when you're outnumbered, fighting even when you're outmatched, believing that people matter more than power or money or status. It's about building something worth protecting, and protecting it with everything you have. Most of all, it's about understanding that the hardest battles aren't fought with guns or fists. They're fought with the decision to keep going when everything in you wants to quit, to choose hope when despair is easier, to love when you've been taught that love makes you weak. Colt and Eliza learned those lessons the hard way, through fire and fear and loss, through nights when they didn't think they'd see morning, through moments when giving up would have been so much easier than holding on. But they held on anyway. And in doing so, they didn't just change their own lives, they changed everyone around them. They showed a town that had forgotten how to stand up that it still had a spine. That power doesn't last forever. That bullies only win if good people do nothing. They weren't perfect. They made mistakes, fought, struggled, questioned everything. But they never stopped trying. And in the end, that's what mattered most. Colt died at 73, in his sleep, in the cabin he'd built with his own hands. Eliza was beside him when he went. She held his hand and whispered that she loved him, and he squeezed her fingers one last time before letting go. The town mourned like they'd lost a father. The funeral was the biggest anyone had ever seen. People came from 3 counties away to pay respects. Eliza stood at the grave, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and didn't cry. She'd cried enough over the years. Now she just felt grateful. Grateful for every moment, every fight, every sunrise they'd watched together from that porch. She lived another 7 years, spent them teaching, gardening, telling stories to grandchildren who looked at her like she was made of magic. When she died, they buried her next to Colt. The headstone was simple: Colt and Eliza Mercer, husband and wife. They stood when others wouldn't. The cabin still stands today. Different family lives there now, but they know the history. They tell visitors about the couple who built it, about the night everything changed, about what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. And sometimes, on cold winter nights when the wind howls and snow piles against the door, people swear they can hear it. The knock that started everything. The moment when one decision, to open a door, to let someone in, to choose compassion over safety, changed the course of lives and built a legacy that would outlast stone. Because that's the thing about courage. It's contagious. It spreads. One person stands up, and suddenly others find the strength to do the same. One act of kindness, of defiance, of hope, creates ripples that reach farther than you'll ever know. Colt and Eliza didn't set out to be heroes. They just set out to survive, to protect what mattered, to do right by each other and the people around them. But in doing that, in choosing to stand when it would have been easier to fall, they became something more. They became proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, that the strongest walls aren't made of stone, they're made of conviction. That home isn't a place, it's the people you'd burn the world down to protect. And that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply opening the door when someone knocks. Even if it's the middle of a blizzard, even if you're scared, even if you don't know what comes next, you open the door anyway, and you let them in.